Fantasy Brains!
The Jacksonville Jaguars are going to be one of the most entertaining offenses to watch in the NFL this season. I'm especially excited to see what Trevor Lawrence can do this season with a brand new offensive-minded head coach in Liam Cohen coming straight from the offensive coordinator position in Tampa Bay. We have a new GM in Jacksonville with James Gladstone starting the new trend of having a GM only be, 30 years old at this point. But he's coming out here and making huge moves off the bat, bringing in Travis Hunter at second overall to play both sides of the ball. And that's going to be something that I'm going to have a lot of fun talking about in this episode. But this Jacksonville Jaguars team, like I mentioned, is such a fun team. There are a ton of players, whether it's in the running back room where you have a four-headed monster. We're not exactly sure who's going to come out on top. And then you have the star-studded receiver duo with second-year player Brian Thomas Jr. and, like I said, second overall pick Travis Hunter. And even the tight end room gets a little bit interesting with the departure of Evan Ingram. So hopefully you guys are excited for this episode of the 32-team series. This is going to be episode 12 featuring the Jacksonville Jaguars. I am Matthew Cahan. I will be your host today. If you've tuned in to the past 11 episodes, you know exactly what we're going to be doing. So if you haven't, go check out one of those former videos to see exactly what we're going to be discussing in this episode. But we're going to be covering this entire fantasy whiteboard on my right here and analyzing the Jacksonville Jaguars offense from a fantasy football perspective. And like I mentioned, this is going to be one of the most interesting teams because there are so many question marks with this team and how the season's going to go. But I mentioned it earlier, you have a new head coach coming in with Liam Cohen, and I'm very excited to see what he can do in Jacksonville. I think this is an offense where if you're coming in as an offensive-minded head coach, you have all the pieces needed to succeed when it comes to the skill position players, when it comes to having a quarterback that can sling the ball. And I think there's going to be a lot of similarities between this team and that Bucs team from last year. We see Baker Mayfield have the best year of his career, goes for over 4,000 passing yards, 40 touchdowns. Now, he did throw a lot of interceptions, but that was the best year of his career, and he did lead the Bucs to a division title and a playoff berth. So we know Liam Cohen has talent. We know that he might be able to turn this team around, and that's exactly the type of coach that Trevor Lawrence needs. Trevor Lawrence has been a player that is arguably the most up and down player in the NFL. You're going to have a lot of truthers out there, such as myself, and you're going to have a lot of people that will just continuously say that he is not a good quarterback. And right now, the stats would back up those people who don't think that he's a good quarterback. You know, we saw his rookie year starts out with Urban Meyer. Urban Meyer, we all know, is a terrible coach, gets fired after 1 year. Doug Peterson comes in year two for Lawrence, and Lawrence has his best season. The Jacksonville Jaguars go to the playoffs. Trevor Lawrence leads one of the best playoff comebacks of all time, down 27-0 to the Chargers. And then they almost beat the Chiefs in the divisional round. And then ever since then, it has just come downhill for this Jags team. 2 straight seasons missing the playoffs, definitely going below expectations. And a lot of it's due to underlying issues with this team and how it was built. But a lot of issues do come down to the quarterback position and Trevor Lawrence. And he gets a huge extension in Jacksonville. They name the stadium after him. They are fully committing to him. And I think that's the right idea. Now, I love Trevor Lawrence in fantasy. I'm going to be excited to be drafting him. If you follow our TikTok page, I put him as a quarterback that is currently being drafted in the 15 to 20 range in quarterbacks that could enter the top 5 to 10 quarterbacks if everything goes right for him this season. But I think with Trevor Lawrence, what we do have to realize is he has never really played with any talent in his career. In his first couple of years, his best players were Christian Kirk. You had Calvin Ridley for 1 year coming off of 2 years not playing in the NFL due to gambling, regulations. And then last year was finally his first taste of good talent with Brian Thomas Jr. And Lawrence obviously had his season cut short due to injury. So really excited to see what he can do coming off a season where he only had 2,100 yards, 12 touchdowns, and 7 picks while missing 7 games. And the Jaguars obviously were not a great team last year. So definitely a lot higher expectations for Lawrence. And this is almost a make or break year for him. If he comes out and gives us another stinker, I think that's when the Jacksonville Jaguars really have to start assessing this quarterback position and thinking, if they are picking top 3 to 5 in the NFL draft, is quarterback on their mind, especially if it means getting off that Trevor Lawrence contract. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think Trevor Lawrence is going to come out. I think he's a Very, very talented quarterback. He can make every throw in the book. His passion for the game is there. His leadership, his winning ability is there, especially when it comes to being clutch. So I think Liam Cohen is hopefully going to be the coach to help him put it all together. The running back room is a complete mess. Starts out with Travis Etienne, Trevor Lawrence's former teammate in Clemson, and then also now, his teammate in Jacksonville. Had a very down year last year, only 800 total yards, about 40 catches, and 2 touchdowns. This was by far the worst year of his career, where in 2023, we saw him as the RB3 overall in fantasy. So he goes from a top 3 fantasy running back to a player that you can't even start. I mean, I started him in the London game, I believe it was either against the Bears or the Vikings, and he had negative fantasy points for me to start out my Sunday. So I definitely was pretty upset. I'm sure a lot of other people were very upset with Etienne last year, but there is no doubt that right now he is the favorite to lead the backfield and definitely could have a good season if this offense plays well and if Etienne's able to win the role. But then you have Tank Bigsby coming off his best year of his career, 800 total yards, 7 touchdowns on 4.6 yards per carry. And I loved what I saw out of Tank Bigsby last season. I think he is the guy to own in this backfield. He's going to be that downhill, hard-nosed runner. He can run in between the tackles. He's great at the goal line. He possesses a very rare combination of both break tackle ability with speed, and his ability to accelerate right out of his first cut. So I love Tank Bigsby. I think he is kind of the guy to own in this backfield. And now with training camp being underway and we're seeing how these depth charts are starting to shake out, Tank Bigsby is the guy who's getting all the carries on the first team offense. So with the new coaching staff coming in, it was very unknown what this backfield is going to look like. And right now, it looks like Bigsby is going to have the lead on it. So ETN coming in with on a contract year where most likely he's not going to get extended. I could see ETN being a trade candidate mid-season, and then they roll with Tank Bigsby, and then the other 2 rookie running backs on this team, starting out with Bhayshul Tuten, the round 4 pick from Virginia Tech, runs a 4.3 40-yard dash, but 23 years old, played a lot of years in college, did produce a heavy amount, about 1,200 rush yards, double-digit touchdowns last year. A player that a lot of people are very high on. Me personally, I am not that high on Bhayshul Tuten. Could I see him being a solid player? Yes. Do I think he'll be a very productive fantasy player, getting a full 3-down workload? I think he's too small. I don't think he has all the assets to be a 3-down running back. But the guy I do absolutely love on the Jacksonville Jaguars team is 7th round pick LaQuint Allen, running back out of Syracuse University. Now, everyone's going to say, hey, you're from Syracuse, or not from Syracuse, you went to Syracuse. There's going to be bias. Of course there is. But I've watched this guy now for 2 years. When he's a freshman, he sat behind Sean Tucker, who is another NFL running back and made it to the league and has produced in a few good weeks in that Liam Cohen offense last year. But LaQuint Allen last year for Syracuse, on a 10-win Syracuse team, had 1,500 total yards, 64 catches, and 20 touchdowns. He proved that he can be a bell cow back. He is a terrific receiving back, but also produces the skills to be a first and second down and in between the tackles runner. And the best part about him, he is only 20 years old. He is one of the youngest players in this draft class, and he still has so much to improve on and still has so many years left in this league. So if you are looking for a sleeper in your dynasty leagues, that's pretty much the only format that Allen's really viable in. I'm telling you, LaQuint Allen, good player, definitely worth stashing. And he did produce at the college level. And I think his receiving upside, if ETN is gone off this team by midseason or next year, I think Allen could easily be in line for the receiving role on this team. So love LaQuint Allen. Looking at the receivers, we got Brian Thomas Jr., one of my favorite players in the entire NFL. He was my favorite rookie last year. Pre-draft process, post-draft process, I loved what I saw out of him. 87 catches, 1,300 yards, 10 touchdowns. Not much else to say about him. He is a stud. He can do it all. He is a game-breaking player, and I'm excited to see what him and Trevor Lawrence can do in his second year and Trevor Lawrence fully healthy. Then you have Travis Hunter, the second overall pick. Biletnikoff winner, 96 catches, a little bit over 1,200 yards, and 14 touchdowns last year for Colorado. And that's just on the offensive side of the ball. Now, when we get to the player projections of this team, that's going to be the fun part of kind of talking about, where we see Hunter and kind of how, what we see him playing on the offensive side versus the defensive side of the ball. Because right now in training camp, he's pretty much playing both sides about 50%. A little bit higher on defense right now, but it's around 50%. So there's going to be a lot of variance to and risk when it comes to drafting a player like Travis Hunter. But he did go second overall, and he comes in as a wide receiver too, and him and Thomas can be a top 3 receiver duo in the NFL. We got De'Ami Brown as the receiver 3. He's going to be a deep threat coming over from the Washington Commanders. Didn't really do much last year, but did end off the season well. Had a very solid playoff run, about 230 receiving yards in those 3 playoff games that they played. So, maybe he can be a solid player in best ball formats where he catches a couple long touchdowns here and there. But I think in your regular redraft leagues, he is not going to be a player of value, and it's going to be almost impossible to figure out the week to start him. I think the player that has the most upside in this receiver room is Parker Washington. Very young player, slot receiver, had about 32 catches for 400 yards and 3 touchdowns last season. Now, I don't think he has any value right now, but if one of these receivers were to go down, like let's say Travis Hunter gets hurt, or maybe he plays more defense, I think Washington would be the higher floor guy out of him and De'Ami Brown to win the slot job. And if you're in the slot, I've mentioned in past videos, you're always going to catch a lot of passes. The slot receiver is always going to be the quarterback's best friend. So I think Parker Washington in the slot, where Trevor Lawrence in the past especially has targeted the slot, I think he is a little bit of a sleeper if somebody is to go down in this offense. But it's going to be a completely new room this year for the most part, with Christian Kirk and Gabe Davis off the roster. So you bring back Thomas, but you add a brand new receiver 2 and receiver 3. And then in the tight end room, Evan Ingram departs to Denver, and Brenton Strange comes in. And we kind of got a glimpse of what Strange is going to look like last year. He had 40 catches for about 400 yards and 2 touchdowns. Ingram did miss a good chunk of the season last year. And I think I really like Strange. I think he is one of the biggest values in fantasy drafts right now when it comes to the tight end position. He's a very talented player. And James Gladstone, the GM, has given him a ton of praise, saying that they are fully confident in his ability to be the starting tight end on this team. And if you are picking in fantasy football and just analyzing how you think players are going to be, good offenses will always produce more yards and more touchdown opportunities. And if you think this Jacksonville Jaguars offense is going to be good, like I think I do, and most people do this year, if you can get the starting tight end in that offense at the tight end 19, 20, 21 price, that's going to be a huge value. So Brenton Strange, very interesting player, and a player I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do and if he can take that next step. And then just looking at their O-line, I am very disappointed. And that was kind of the one thing that I didn't like what they did with this offseason was they did not address the offensive line at all. They did not address the O-line. It was terrible last year. It's the reason why Trevor Lawrence keeps getting sacked and keeps getting hurt. And they really did not address it. So that, in my eyes, similar to the Houston Texans, who we did in the last video, is going to be the make or break of this team. Because typically what you're going to see is in the NFL, the teams that end up folding are the teams that can't protect their quarterback and can't block for their running backs. And right now, I could definitely see that happening for the Jaguars. But moving on now to the projections for this team, I have some massive projections for this offense. I got Trevor Lawrence throwing for over 4,100 yards this year and 31 touchdowns on about 370 completions. I have him finishing as my quarterback 11 on the season, and he's going as the quarterback 22, which is absolutely ridiculous. This is a guy, to be clear, that, let's take away last year because he was hurt for most of the year. But in 2022, he was the quarterback 8 in fantasy. In 2023, quarterback 13 in fantasy. So he's proven that even if he's not going to win games, he is going to sling that rock and he is going to score fantasy points. So I think, quarterback 22, he's going to be the value of the draft. I got him at my quarterback 11. I think that he is going to easily beat this ADP, and I think that this offense with the poor O-line and probably not going to be able to establish the run, probably going to have to be coming from behind in games. I think they're going to be very pass heavy, and I think he is going to be throwing for a lot of yards this season. Now, Lawrence also has that rushing upside. I got him going for about 150 rush yards on the season, maybe 200. So he's never really been afraid to run, and I think that's the small upside that he's going to have over quarterbacks in that range, such as Jared Goff or Michael Penix, who are more pure pocket quarterback passers, if you might say. Looking at the receivers, Brian Thomas, I have him as my receiver 5. He's going as the receiver 7. I have him going on the season for about 93 catches, 1,200 yards, and 9 touchdowns. So I have him having an absolute monster season. This just goes hand in hand. I have Trevor Lawrence passing for 4,100 yards. The number one receiver in that offense is going to absolutely eat. And I think Brian Thomas, like I said, is an absolute stud coming into year 2. He produced a lot of his production in the second half of the season. He had a stint last year where he was injured for a couple games. Now he did still play, but he was hindered by, a rib injury and a shoulder injury. And then when he got healthy, he showed that he was one of the best receivers in the NFL in his rookie year already. So again, I don't have much to say about Brian Thomas Jr. All I would say is if you are drafting him, you are getting an absolute stud of a player. He has a high floor every week. He has a really high ceiling as well. And I think if you're looking in your redraft leagues for end of the first, late second round player, Brian Thomas Jr. is going to be an ascending player once again. I mean, he finished as the receiver 4 in fantasy his rookie season. So if you're not talking about safety with a player with Mac Jones throwing you the ball for half the year, I don't know what is a safe player. Travis Hunter. This is just and I don't want to take too long on Hunter because I don't want to take an hour on this video just to talk about, what he's going to do. But my honest opinion on Travis Hunter is that he's a lot better of a corner than he is receiver. Now, I think he's a great player on both sides, but I think cornerback wise, he could be a top 3 corner in the league when it's all said and done. In 2 years, he could be a top 3 corner. I don't think he can be a top 3 receiver. I think he could be top 15 if he hits his ceiling. I think he could be a really solid receiver too to Brian Thomas Jr. and this could be one of the best tandems in the league. But his ceiling as a cornerback is way higher in my opinion. And that's just concerning from a fantasy perspective. I put out a tweet the other day saying I love his value in redraft and best ball right now because he's going as, in the early 30s for receiver. Now, I only have him as my receiver 39 because I don't know what to expect. I have him going for about 70 catches, 800 yards, and 6 touchdowns, which is still a good year for a rookie receiver. But until we really know what percentage he's going to play on both sides, it's so hard to evaluate him. And at his wide receiver 15 price in Dynasty, I am just willing to stay away from that. I would much rather take a guy like Tet McMillan, who I'm not even that high on, or a Emeka Ibuka, who I love, or just wait for a guy like Luther Burden or Matthew Golden. Travis Hunter is going to be the highest risk reward player. And the problem is the risk or the reward is just not great enough because even at his ceiling, he's still a receiver too. He's still not a better receiver than Brian Thomas Jr. And that's kind of where my issues lie is that people are drafting him saying, oh, he went second overall as a receiver, but he's a receiver too. And he's also a cornerback. And there is a situation where he, in a year or two, comes out and plays 75% on defense and 40% on offense. And 40% of offensive snaps is not a viable receiver in fantasy football. So I think this year, when you're drafting him, like I said, I have him at my receiver 39. I think the upside is totally there. He could be a complete freak of a player. He's only 21, 22 years old, and he could play 80% on both sides, especially when he's young. And he could be a great player in fantasy. And I think in redraft and best ball, that he's going to be he's a great player to take a risk on, especially at his price. But in Dynasty, I am staying away unless you have such a high amount of assets that you can just throw around value. I'm personally just not willing to take that risk on Hunter. But it's going to be really interesting to see how he does this year because I do truly think that he is going to be a very, very good player in the NFL. It's just what percentage is he going to play on each side? Looking at the other receivers, De'Ami Brown, I got him as my receiver 77. I think he'll be a good best ball player, like I mentioned, but you're never going to pick the right week to start him. So he is going as the receiver 79. I got him about right on par. He's not really a draftable player in your redraft leagues. And that's the same with Parker Washington. If he is able to win the slot job and it's going to be Hunter, Thomas, and Washington on the field as opposed to Brown on the field, Washington does have some standalone value, but if he doesn't win that job and he needs an injury to happen, he obviously has no value. Brenton Strange, like I mentioned, going as the tight end 22. I got him as my tight end 19 right now. Now, again, I did talk about how I do like him, and you're going to say, tight end 19, that doesn't seem very high. But I do really like Brenton Strange. And I think, I have him tight end 19, but I got him very close to the next 5 to 6 tight ends in front of him. And I think that when you have your coach and your GM speaking highly of you, that is what matters most. You can think about all these training camp reports from these beat writers and everything like that. But when the coach comes out and actually talks about a player, I am going to believe what the coach is saying. And I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for touchdowns in this offense, which means that he could easily sneak in the top 8 to 10 if he catches 7 touchdowns or 8 touchdowns this year, and the Jaguars are a great offense. So I think if you believe in this Jaguars offense, which we all do, Brenton Strange could be a huge value. Looking at the running back room, I got Etienne as my RB 39. He's going as the RB 37. I have him going for about 580 rush yards and 3 touchdowns, along with another 300 receiving yards and 30 catches. So I do think he's going to be an all-around decent back. But like I mentioned, I think Tank Bigsby is going to be the guy to win the job when it comes to getting those carries and those goal line carries. So for Tank Bigsby, I have him finishing actually just one slot higher at the RB 38. Now he's going as the RB 44, so I think he has higher value. And of course, this is all based on PPR. If you're in a half point PPR, that makes Bigsby even more valuable because he doesn't catch passes. I just like Bigsby, only 23 years old, very young player. I got him going for about 813 rush yards, 8 rushing touchdowns. So I do think that, rushing wise, he could have some high floor games for you. And I think he'll be a good player to stash on your bench. If you have an injury or a bye week, and Bigsby can come in and give you a safe 7 to 10 points, but can give you the upside to score 20. I already mentioned it, with Bhayshul Tuten, he's going as RB 46. I got him as my RB 53. I got him going for about 26 catches, 250 yards, and then another 300 on the ground. So I don't think he's going to be anything special. I think there's just going to be too many mouths to feed in this running back room. Now, if Etienne does get traded, then Tuten does raise a lot in value, but I think Tuten is one of the most overdrafted players in Dynasty right now. So I'm staying away from him. I don't believe in the talent as much. And I did mention earlier about LaQuint Allen. I don't have him projected out because he is not a draftable player, but be aware of his value as a receiving back. 64 catches last year for Syracuse. He has that receiving upside, and he has the NFL build to be successful. Let's move on now to the strength of schedule for this team. Now at the quarterback position, we have them having the 16th easiest schedule for quarterbacks. Now, that's right in the middle of the league, so that's pretty solid for Trevor Lawrence. Now, I'm not going to be too scared even if it was much worse or even much better, because I think with T-Law, he's going to be slinging the ball. Even if he throws double-digit interceptions, that's not going to completely take away from what his fantasy value brings. So I'm excited. I think that's a good schedule. And you pair that up with the third easiest schedule for wide receivers. So that just adds fuel to the fire with why I'm so high on Brian Thomas Jr. They're going to be playing an easier schedule. That's great for Travis Hunter as well. And at tight end, it's the 10th hardest. You have the 23rd ranked in the league. But I mentioned in past videos, I don't think the tight end, strength of schedule matters as much because there's so many different players on defense that could realistically be guarding the tight end, as opposed to with the receiver position, you're only going to really have the cornerbacks guarding them, especially when they're an outside receiver. So I think with this passing offense, the strength of schedule looks great for them, which just makes you feel even more confident in them down the line. Now, the running backs, they have the hardest schedule in the NFL. So you have a bunch of running backs where you don't have any guys with standalone value. I am avoiding all of these running backs. And when I say all, I'm just saying the top 3 with Tuten, Bigsby, and Etienne in redraft. I'm avoiding all of them. If I wanted one of them, I think Bigsby is the guy to get. In best ball, I think they're all worth taking because if you get a couple shares of each guy, one of them is going to work out. And if you have the running back on a really good offense, that again means more touchdown opportunities, and that will be good. But in your regular redraft leagues, it's going to be hard to pick out which one is really going to be the guy, especially because they're all kind of going in the same range. Their playoff schedule is not great, especially for receivers. Week 15, they're at home, which is good because you play in the warm weather against the Jets, though, who are going to be a great defense. That's bad for these receivers. Week 16, you have an awful matchup against the Denver Broncos in Denver, where you're playing in a tough environment against arguably a top 3 to 5 defense in the NFL who specializes in their secondary. So those first two matches are going to be absolutely brutal for these Jags receivers. Now, you're not going to sit Brian Thomas Jr. no matter what. And if Travis Hunter is good, you're not going to sit him either. But that does pose some concern for you in those best ball leagues where those weeks 15 and 16 and 17 matter a lot. But that is a little bit concerning. Not going to make me not draft those players, but something to be weary of when you're thinking about your playoff schedules. And then week 17, you have a beautiful matchup against the Colts in Indianapolis where you get to play in a dome against a really bad defense in a divisional matchup. So week 17, if you can make it there with these players, you're looking pretty, but those weeks 15 and 16 do not look great. I truly do think this Jaguars team is going to be a big surprise to some people. Now, I think their downfall is going to come either with injuries or with pass protection, just not being able to protect Trevor Lawrence, taking too many sacks on third downs, which means they can't continue their drives. And consistency. And that's the biggest thing with this team. Consistency on both sides of the ball. Their defense started to come to play last year, second half of the season, and they have some pieces on defense that are going to keep them in games. But they're going to be in some shootouts, and they're really going to need their offense to produce this year if they want to be a playoff team and beat out the Texans for the division. So I hope everybody enjoyed this episode with the Jaguars. I love doing this episode personally. The Jaguars are a team that, especially with Trevor Lawrence being there and Brian Thomas, I've kind of always followed them for the past couple of years. And I truly do believe that they are going to be a better team than people think. So make sure to follow us on all of our social media accounts at Leatherbrains. You can check us out on X, Instagram, TikTok. Check out our YouTube at Leatherbrains Podcast and hit that subscribe button. And then you can find the audio version of our podcast on Spotify. And then let me know in the comments, what else you want to see in these future videos. I will implement whatever you guys are looking for in these future videos. We still got 20 teams to go, 5 divisions to go. The next division that we will be doing is the NFC South. So definitely stay tuned to that, and we'll see you next time.
3, 2, 1.
Got a blast!
Thanks for checking out the Fantasy Brains. Don't miss next week's episode, Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern. See you next week, Brainiacs.